This is the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Kendall of the notaballerina.com travel blog. Every episode I'll share travel tales from several fellow travel lovers, and together we hope to entertain and inspire you, remind you of some of your own great travel experiences, and encourage you to hit the road again soon. Hello and welcome to episode 213 of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Today's topic is sustainable travel tips. I think we all know that it is important to travel in a sustainable way wherever we can, to think of the environment. We have come a long way in our thinking from what I remember in my primary school days of vaguely hearing about something called the greenhouse effect and knowing something about, getting rid of spray cans. We've come a long way since then, thank goodness, but we certainly have a long way to go if we look at all of the climate change research. So we know that some parts of traveling are not actually the best or helpful in terms of the environment, but there's still plenty of reasons we should travel. So how can we do it in a sustainable way? In today's episode, I have some tips from 3 different guests who have sometimes overlapping, but I think it doesn't hurt to be told more than once sometimes overlapping tips about the best ways we can travel sustainably. I feel like thanks to the COVID pandemic, we've kind of sort of swept aside sustainability a little bit. I guess it's become less of a focus during 2020 for a lot of us, partly because I guess other things have become more important, like the importance of hygiene and not contaminating things. So that's led to kind of more single-use objects and so on. So it's been kind of a tricky year from that perspective, but also especially in the early stages of COVID, when most of the world or nearly all the world was in lockdown, we saw all those really good news stories about nature returning to, well, being more natural, I suppose. Wild animals turning up where they hadn't been before, beaches looking cleaner than ever, water looking clearer than ever. So that is a reminder that we humans are not really the best. Anyway, hopefully revisiting some ideas about sustainability will be a useful thing for all of us, and all of these tips from today's guests will help us do that. So my first guest today is Brighde Reed from World Vegan Travel, who, especially as a vegan perhaps, is even more acutely aware and even keener to promote, I suppose, sustainable travel. And she had lots and lots of good tips to share.
Yeah, well, this is a topic that I have been thinking so much about. I think, as the climate crisis unfolds and more people are getting on board with the fact that this is our reality, I think it's something that all of us are thinking about, especially those of us in the travel industry as well, as we look at, of course, the impact on the climate crisis for our flights and what have you. And it's obviously that is something that is a very big thing and certainly important to talk about. But there are certainly some things that we can be doing everyone can be doing when they are traveling in regards to sustainability. And something that I really recommend is to carry around with you what I call like a zero, it's zero waste. It's not really zero waste. It's lower waste, like travel kits. And I can share some things that are in there if you like.
Yes, that would be great. Please do.
Sure. So the first thing is the reusable water bottle. Of course, everyone knows about this. It's not new or anything like that, but there are a couple of little twists to this because, I think when you have a refillable water bottle, this is really, really good when you are traveling to a place where there is drinkable water.
Mm-hmm.
However,
isn't it? Yeah.
Yes. And I think, it's becoming easier to go into a cafe or a restaurant and ask for them to fill it up. Like, it can feel a little bit weird, but I think everyone is understanding that it's worth the effort to do that and maybe the discomfort. And I think restaurants and hotels are becoming more good about it. However, when you're traveling to a place that doesn't have potable water, this can be a real issue for a few reasons. Number one, bottled water is often a big source of income in certain little cafes and restaurants, and that can be an issue. And of course, the scourge of the plastic water bottle, and particularly in places where there's not much recycling. So I would like to suggest a couple of things that you can have in your little zero waste travel kit. The first is like an emergency plan B, which is just a little thing of these water purification tablets that you can buy. And you could get them on Amazon, although frustratingly, like you buy 100 tablets and they come in like a little Ziploc plastic bag, which is kind of annoying. However, these tiny little tablets, they are really effective at purifying water. If you're going hiking in Europe and you need to take water from streams, for example, or if you're in a place where there's no potable water, you just add one of these tablets into a litre of water and you will have clean water in half an hour. So that's a really good thing to have. They're super light, they're super easy to pack, they're great. But there are these other two products that I have both of these and I find them really, really great. One's called a SteriPen. Are you familiar with the SteriPen?
I've heard of it, but I don't exactly know how it works.
Right. So it's purification of water through a UV light. And it's basically like a little wand. And you turn it on and you put it in your litre of water and you stir and agitate the water for 90 seconds and your water is clean.
Wow. Seems like magic.
It's really quite cool. And I always tell people, because people I think are a little bit skeptical about it, but just go online, look at the research behind how effective this is, and you decide for yourself.
Cool.
SteriPen is a really good one. Another really good one that I have got, that I also got, one of our clients in Rwanda supported this project on Kickstarter, and it's actually called a LARQ water bottle, LARQ.
Uh-huh.
And it's a really attractive metal double insulated bottle. They're not that big. They have produced some bigger models now, so that's good. But basically, you pour the non-drinkable water in. You press the little button at the top, which has a UV light in it as well, and you can recharge it as well with a USB cord. And then you just agitate the bottle for 3 minutes, I think, until the light stops flashing, and you have drinkable water.
Wow.
And both of these things are quite expensive. I think they're about $100 or so. However, if you don't lose it, I've worked out that it will pay for itself in a 2-month trip.
Yeah, well, absolutely. If you think of how many bottles of water you will be buying, and it's not just that, it's the fact that you are then not disposing of those dozens and dozens of plastic bottles. So I'm prepared to pay a bit for that.
Exactly. And my extra tip for that is to make sure that you have your name and an email address or contact information clearly stated on there. So, because I'm terrible, I leave things in places, and when I have my email address on there, it does sometimes come back to me. So that would be my tip there.
Yeah, that's very clever. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think most people know about like having some cutlery with you and a reusable straw with you. I really like to have the reusable straw, and I usually use it as more of a prop than anything. I can explain. So when I'm going to a place where I'm going to have a drink and they probably have plastic straws, I will learn how to say no straw please in the language. But I would be the same if I was a wait staff. I would often just be on automatic pilot, or the person at the bar is on automatic pilot. So I physically show them the straw. And then if there's any sort of question, I might even have some photos on my phone to show, and even like photos of that terrible photo of the straw up that turtle's nose, for example.
Yes.
And which of course explains why I don't want the straw, because I think a lot of people might wonder, well, why doesn't she want a straw?
Exactly.
And then it just is an extra thing to sort of stick in the head and make, that don't forget no straw for this person.
Plus, they might start to think more broadly than that and think, oh, yeah, maybe we shouldn't offer straws at all here. And,
maybe, yeah, that's good too.
Some really useful tips there from Brighde, and I'll put a couple of links in the show notes to some of the products she referred to because they are particularly awesome sounding, I think. Now, my next guest today is Louise Southerden, and Lou and I discussed the broader kind of context of what sustainable travel is all about before we got into the nitty-gritty of some sustainable travel tips.
I think the idea is that if is this trip I'm about to do, is this something that, my kids or grandkids could do in the future? And is this, if I travel this way, is this something that, we wouldn't, and there's a question that I sometimes ask myself in life, I guess, in general, as well as in travel. But I kind of think if everyone did what I'm about to do, what kind of world would this be? And sometimes I think we do have to stop and think that, because if everyone traveled as much as I did, maybe the world wouldn't be a good place. And I know that travel has a lot of benefits, and I've spent 20 years writing about a lot of those benefits, and I do think travel is a powerful force for good. But I think we're also at this different place in history now where we can't just travel as much as we like, as far as we like, as often as we like, and in any way that we like. We really do have to stop and think. And I think it is, because it's all changing and the travel industry is changing, it's actually becoming easier to do that. And we're not as individuals on our own in this. Travel companies are offering trips that make a difference. Companies like World Expeditions and Intrepid are offsetting all their clients' ground travel and often their air travel as well. Offsets are a whole different discussion, conversation.
We've been having that discussion today in the Thoughtful Travellers Facebook group, exactly that, so it's been interesting to see everyone's point of view. But
yes.
But what are some other simple things we can do? Yeah, what are some simple things that the average traveller can do to travel more sustainably?
There's lots of different things we can do, and I think to organise them in my mind, I often put them into categories. So there's things about carbon emissions. So that would be choosing how we get somewhere, maybe offsetting the carbon emissions we can't avoid. Choosing low impact modes of transport such as electric vehicles or bikes or sea kayaks or hiking instead of doing a driving trip. I don't know if you know, Hurtigrute has just launched 2 hybrid cruise ships, so you might want to choose those kind of ships instead of the regular ones. So there's carbon emissions, that's one category. I think there's probably 4 or 5 categories. The second one would be food. So I guess looking at where your food is sourced when you're away. Not always easy, but low food miles and even 0-kilometre restaurants are becoming more common. Organic places, I think they call them bio in Europe, BIO.
That's right.
Bio hotels. Even I stayed in a bio hotel in Berlin once, and everything they served was organic, and they had locally sourced furnishings and materials and things, which was cool. So I guess food that's local, organic, seasonal, plant-based. Choosing plant-based options when you travel, which also has the added advantage of keeping you healthier, because in some countries like India, it's probably better for you to eat the plants than the meat, which you don't know how it's been prepared or stored, things like that. This third one may be waste. I guess plastic is the most obvious thing, but trying not to use single-use plastics, trying to patronize places, hotels or restaurants that don't use single-use plastics, even taking your own reusable, not just bottles and cups, but cutlery and lunch boxes and shopping bags, things like that, which is just a no-brainer. Now everyone seems to be doing that. Well, not everyone, I guess. But
not everyone, but it's certainly way more widespread. Yeah.
Yes. And a lot of hotels now are switching from tiny toiletries to bulk dispensers. which is something I always look at now when I go to hotels. And if it's got the tiny toiletries, they get a little black mark against their name, because it's so common. And it's just, I think the biggest initiative that I heard about last year was Intercontinental Hotel Group phasing out tiny toiletries in 843,000 hotel bathrooms.
Wow.
Across something like 5,000 hotels worldwide in their group.
That's huge,
and they're
isn't it?
hoping to that's huge. Yeah, they're hoping to do that all by next year, 2021.
Wow.
So that was big. And so we've got carbon emissions, food waste, and I guess positive impact would be another one. Some hotels or eco lodges will plant a tree for every guest to offset their emissions. You might look at, there might be places that run cleanup days, or just places that give back to the environment. And a lot of places also give back to local to people who live there and community members. They might be training or employing people who live in that area. So there's a lot of social initiatives. I guess my focus is a lot on environmental sustainability.
It is nice to think about the positive impact kind of activities that tour operators, hotels, and even travellers themselves can do to be really more proactive in helping out the environment. So that was a really good point from Lou. Now, my final guest today is Anna Chittenden, and Anna spent a lot of time in Asia, especially Singapore and Japan, and so some of her tips are interesting because they're a little bit focused on the way that different cultures work, which I think was a really important part to hear about.
So I think that sustainability is one of the most interesting new, I don't want to say topic because it's not a topic, but, issues that's going on with travel, because essentially, taking flights and air travel is, uses up a lot of, gives out a lot of carbon and everything. So I think that there's just like a lot of ways that people can just try and be sustainable, like once they get to the destination. And I think that there's lots of kind of like easy things that people can do. So I think that there's like the obvious things like, taking your own bags when you're going, like taking tote bags when you're going somewhere. Because especially in, I find this in places like Singapore and even Japan, they like to give you a lot of plastic.
A lot of nice packaging.
Yeah, so everything they want to give you, it's in plastic and then another plastic and then another plastic. So I think a lot of it is just by like saying, like, refusing, saying no, and then just bringing your own, small tote bag, so you can just like refuse any, like as much plastic as people try and give you.
Yes.
So like bring your own tote bags, bring your own coffee cups and water bottles. So just like bringing as much as you can, so you don't become, one of those annoying people that's actually just, like using more plastic while you're traveling and actually like adding to the problem. Because especially in places, it might be somewhere like Indonesia as well, they might not have the infrastructure there to cope with, more of the plastic and the waste. So I think it's just like bringing as much as you can and just saying no if someone tries to give you sort of like plastic, and, bringing your own cups and everything. So I think that's kind of an easy thing that everyone can do. And once you sort of get into it, it just becomes like second nature, that when you're going out and about. So say if you're like whatever in Tokyo or whatever, you're like, I've got my tote bag, I've got my bottle, I've got my water bottle, I've got my reusable coffee cup, and you just kind of get it into like a routine. And I guess another way to be sustainable is just by like taking the public transport. And obviously walking as well, but in Tokyo especially, like the public transport is so good, and also taking the trains and everything. So I think just kind of like being like clued up in all those sorts of areas, so you're not having to kind of go around by car or like flights and all that sort of thing. But I think another aspect of sustainability that's quite interesting and isn't talked about so much is like the human side. So when my previous job, I used to work for Ben and Jerry's, and we did a lot around sustainability, and and a lot of that was around like the people. So you have like an environmental aspect of sustainability, but then you also have the people aspect. So it's kind of like, how are you supporting like communities? How are you supporting the locals?
So I do like that Anna touches on the people aspect there and how you can support locals and communities. And I have got more on from that chat that I'll share in a future episode, which is, kind of another aspect of sustainability that I think is also really, really important. So, thank you very much for listening to episode 213 of the Thoughtful Travel podcast. A massive shout out to my guests for all their really useful info and tales. First up, I chatted with Brighde Reed of World Vegan Travel, so you can find her at worldvegantravel.com. And we're going to list in the show notes a couple of the products she referred to as well that are particularly useful to help us travel more sustainably. Next up, I chatted with Louise Southerden, and Lou blogs at No Impact Girl, as well as you can find her writing in all kinds of magazines as well. And last but definitely not least, I chatted with Anna Chittenden of The Lost Guides. So Anna's a guidebook writer and has a recent guidebook out about Tokyo, which is just beautiful. And you can find out more about that at thelostguides.com. Now, of course, come along and chat with us in the Thoughtful Travellers Facebook group. If you have some other tips on how to travel sustainably, I would love to hear them. I try to do my best, but I have to say, I always feel like I'm a little bit behind. I don't know. Am I disorganized? Am I not doing my research well enough? I don't have a good answer, but I know I need to be a more sustainable traveler when I get back out there. So come along and give me some tips, if nothing else. You can find the link for the Thoughtful Travellers Facebook group in the show notes, and the show notes for this episode are at notaballerina.com/213. So I hope you have found some useful tips, and if you have more, do come and share them. And as always, thank you very much for listening. This has been another episode of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Show notes and other information are at notaballerina.com/podcast. Join me again soon for another chat about why we travel. Bye for now.